How do you know if it's running?
It is currently, it's videoing, because that's flashing in the counter.
Okay, I couldn't see
And
that.
if you match it again, it will stop it.
Okay, all right, so we're running. Thank you. Okay, so you have two handouts in front of you. Oh, I didn't give you one, Tyler, sorry. This one is a continuation of the book. This one right here. And this is the chapter on exposure. And this chapter is going to take what we talk about today as far as shutter speeds and the performance of the shutter, and it's going to merge it into this bit of knowledge that we have from the last class about the apertures, okay? There is a distinctive relationship between the two. It's called a one-to-one relationship. One colon one. That's a ratio. It means that they perform in the same fashion that the apertures do. Each one of those settings on the shutter speed dial, just like each one of the settings, the numbered settings on the aperture ring, represents one stop. They're structured the same. One full click on the shutter speed dial makes one stop adjustment either faster or slower, depending on the number, your direction you're going, just like one full click on the aperture, one full number. Now the cameras that you have, please take them out and let's look at them as we talk today. So this is essential that you read before we go to DeVille. Now, put the camera in front of you with the lens facing towards me. And look down at the top of the camera. And the dial to the right of this structure right here, this thing on top of the camera, this triangular thing, is called the pentaprism. Pentaprism. But the dial that's located to the right of the pentaprism, is called the shutter speed dial. Shutter speed dial. And that shutter speed dial, when you look down at it, has quite an assortment of color, doesn't it? And numbers. And the numbers go all the way from colored numbers. What color are your numbers that are? They're orange, red. Okay. The last number that is white is 1, right? A simple 1. That means 1 second. Now the number that turns orange, kind of orange-red, says 2. And that's a half second. So those numbers, see my camera? Are you set up for video? This is going to be complicated. camera has many numbers that are orange red. See it? As opposed to the cameras that everyone has, including those people that are not able to be with us today. They'll have the same camera. So all the numbers that are white represent a half second, a fourth of a second, an eighth of a second. Those numbers are fractions. And so consequently, everybody has this, from before. The numbers are not full numbers, except the one. That means 1 second. Now it's a half, then it's a fourth, then it's an eighth, then it's a 15th, then it's a 30th, then it's a 60th, then it's a 1/125th. Then it's a 250th, 500, and 1/1000. Now, with the shutter speeds, it's a little easier to see that one-to-one relationship, that one stop, right? Because when we were talking about the apertures, we said if you're moving to a smaller opening and you move from one number like F8 to F11, that's one full stop, meaning it cuts the brightness in half, right? If you move the other way, from F11 to F8, you double the brightness. You double the light. Same thing here with the shutter speed. If you go from a slow shutter of 1/15 to a faster shutter of 1/30, it becomes half the exposure time. So the shutter represents the time that the light strikes either the digital sensors or the film. The circle of confusion. So there is a one-stop relationship. If you go this way, you're cutting, reducing the amount of light one stop. You're reducing the volume of light one stop. Excuse me, the time. When I say amount, I'm referencing the time that the light strikes. When I'm talking about either a reduction or an increase of the light, I'm talking the volume, the amount, volume. Amount is a nebulous term. In this equation of proper exposure, the amount of light is affected with the shutter, but it concerns time, the length of time. The amount of light is also affected with the aperture, but it speaks of volume. I can give you an analogy. It's real simple. You people that are scientists and work in labs, you have beakers, don't you? Mm-hmm. And you have a beaker that's approximately a quart, right? And it's about that big around. and you take the beaker to the faucet, because you're gonna gather water. So, if you just turn on the faucet enough to have a trickle of light, then the water's gonna be more controlled, a trickle of water, it's gonna be more controlled, I said light, didn't I? A trickle of water, it's gonna be more controlled as it enters the beaker. But if you go to the sink and you rack that faucet all the way open, it's gonna splash everywhere, isn't it? And it's gonna be very disorganized. Same thing with the aperture and the shutter. So, when you open the faucet, how long you leave it open represents the shutter. And how much water you allow to run into the beaker, the volume of water, is the aperture. Can you see it? Can you picture it in your head? Amelia, you're looking a little...
Sorry, can you say what you said again, just about the faucet letting the water in?
Okay. A good analogy for collecting water represents the analogy for collecting light. And the intent of our collection of light in this class is to keep it very orderly, like that image up there on the top of the cabinet. Depth of field, resolution, that represents order. And so with the gathering of water in this beaker, we need to keep it orderly. You could think in terms of the kitchen. When you're trying to get a measuring cup and you're trying to get a full cup, you want to allow the water to gather slowly with a little trickle of water so that you can line the top of the water up accurately with the 1 cup mark. So the water running into either the beaker or the measuring cup represents the shutter, how long it runs, and how it enters the collection vessel, slowly or chaotically, is the aperture. So here's your tiny little hole that represents order. Here's the wide open hole for the aperture, or the iris. It represents chaos. And everybody has read the handout that I gave you last class, right? And when we were, it addresses film and format and all of that. Now we're talking about proper exposure of the film. And after reading that handout on film formats, and after seeing the different cameras, you can see that the bigger camera carries bigger film, which gives a larger recorded image. Which is why, in the digital world, you want high DPI. Dots per square inch. And you want high megapixels, which talks about the screen, sensors. The more megapixels you have, the more DPI you have, the better the final image. The more resolved, the more informed. So I'm back to going, whoa, get ready. If you want a decent camera, digital camera, and you all need to be thinking about this now, Christmas is coming. Santa Claus's sleigh will be loaded with cameras this year. But you want at least the lower professional grade camera. And you're gonna spend, you'll find out on Tuesday, anywhere between 600 and $1,000, you know. I was in the business for 40 years. Don't buy cheap. It'll come back and bite you. Okay, now, back to this aperture shutter relationship. They work in tandem. They work together to produce a well-informed negative or digital file. And in that last handout I gave you, which I don't have with me, but remember that one sheet that had the strip of numbers across the top? Y'all turn to that sheet and look at it. You got too many devices there. Would somebody not, I'm gonna check this video and make sure it's still running, because I don't know if it's gonna time out on me. No, it's still running. Find that sheet. And it is a list of aperture and shutter numbers, isn't it? Now you know the fraction represents shutter. I think I'm still in the frame. Now you know that fraction represents the shutter. And the other number, the f-stop, represents the aperture. And each one of those combinations on that sheet of paper equals the same density of information on the negative. The same density of information on the digital file. Because that's what you want to produce, is a perfect exposure. Lauren, will you shoot a detail of that? I mean, just come up here and do it, because I'm gonna erase it. I don't think they have it. Of the lens and the different. Thank you. Okay. So, that's why when you buy a lens, you want to make sure that it's a good quality lens, that it has all of these elements of glass inside. And this is why, when you buy a camera lens, you want to spend some money. And I'll say over and over and over, the lenses that they equip with these package deals that you see on Amazon and all these other places, I guarantee, as they say in New Orleans, that you are buying a doorstop. They're worthless. They're plastic. They do not have these elements of glass in it. And those elements of glass organize the light. Organize the light information so when it arrives at the circle of confusion, which is where the film or the sensors are located, that the information has as much control over contrast as possible. Contrast is controllable. You don't have to have, you should if you're going to really produce a quality commercial image. You don't have to have a lot of lights to fill the environment. It definitely helps for quality commercial shooting. But if you're aware of how to control the arrival of the light information at these two planes of light sensitivity, film and sensors, then you can control the contrast. You want to keep the contrast low so that you have value information in every grayscale value possible, moving from white to black. And the trick is to, number one, shoot film over digital, because digital has an elevated contrast level. And the other trick is to give it a long, slow exposure. Let that light not shock the film, but let it allow it to arrive slowly and embed itself in the light-sensitive surface. Is this making sense? It's not confusing. I mean, when I went to grad school, I had to take a physics of light class. It was required. And I was there with all those people like Tyler and Brent, who understand algebra and all these other types of math equations that go into scientific study. And I put my little butt down in the chair, and he started, I'm serious, the front wall was nothing but a chalkboard. And he started at that end, and he ended up over there, still making rows of equations. And he said, see, I proved it. That equals that over there. He was proving the Scheimpflug method of exposure with large format cameras. And I went cross-eyed. I just sat there in shock. I went up to the nice gentleman after class and I said, sir, I'm gonna fail this class. And he said, you're one of those art graduate students, aren't you? And I said, uh-huh. And he said, I give allowances for that. And I went, oh, shoot. So do you think I missed the class?
I could afford to.
Do you think I understood everything that came, every pearl of wisdom that came out of his mouth? I got maybe 15% of it. But there's a group of photographers who love that kind of thing. And what I'm trying to show you in this class is it's not complicated. It's logical. It's critical thinking, deductive reasoning. It's physics, earth science, logical study and thinking about life. So, whether we're in the darkroom making photographic prints, or we're out taking photographs, we need to keep that exposure long and slow as possible. When you go home, nobody wants mom to come in the house, in the bedroom, raise the shades, say, breakfast in 10 minutes. You go, oh God, this sounds like school. So, quiet, respectful approach to people in film and paper, photographic paper, is the way to be successful. Everything is connected, everything. And this proves it. So, now one thing I do want to add to our discussion of apertures is all of you, and I'm just so grateful that we have enough Canon AE1 cameras for even you guys that aren't here. You're gonna get the same kind of camera. But if you pick the camera up, put the strap around the neck, hold the camera like you're supposed to. Right, now with that left hand that's on the barrel of the lens, find your aperture ring. It's different from the focusing ring. The focusing ring is real broad. The aperture ring has numbers on it, right? And you're moving it, right? Move it from one number to the other. Did you find it, Tyler?
Is it the silver or the black?
It's the one with numbers. It's the silver. See the numbers? Okay. You get full stops.
Is it the one with the A on it?
Sorry. Now, you and you and you, the three of you, you have a click in between a whole number, don't you? That's called a half stop. Half stop. And Tyler, you don't have one of those. You have full stops. So, in between these aperture numbers, for the three of you, there is a half stop. And that means that if I'm moving from 5/6 to F8, I'm not increasing, I'm not doubling it. I'm just increasing it half. Okay? So you do have these subtle adjustments that Tyler, you don't have. Now, is it gonna be harmful or damaging in what you do? No. For this reason, and we're talking exposure now, and when you read that chapter, this one, it's going to go through all of this again. I just lost what I was gonna say. Half stops. Repeat what I was saying. Oh, I was talking about Tyler. It's not gonna harm anything that you do, for this reason. Digital is not forgiving. You have to be absolutely accurate when you're exposing a digital file. You have maybe a half stop error. That's it. And it's better to err on the underexposure side than on the overexposure side. Because if you overexpose a digital file, it washes out. As opposed to underexposing a digital file, and it gets darker. You want it to be darker. It gets darker because you build up information. And you cannot afford to lose information when you're trying to get an image that you're going to use on an enlarged scale. If you're gonna blow that baby up to a poster, you have very little tolerance of adjustment. So, now film works the opposite way. And we have two types of film, image capture. You have a positive and you have a negative. I didn't bring that with me. I tried to reorganize all of this last year. I have it. Every time I do one of these classes, I do something different to improve it. It's a work in progress. Okay. Here we go. We have some samples. Got your phone on it. This is small format. Small format film. Small format film. This is medium format film. Can you see images there? This is large format film. This is negative film. This is positive film. Can you see something there? Maybe a little easier. Positive? Mm-hmm. So, this is negative. This is positive. This is negative. This is positive. This is negative. This is positive. So, and we can clearly see that one's black and white and one's color, right? So, let's talk about that for a second. In addition to two different styles of recording information on film, you've got the negative style and you've got the positive style, which is called a slide. It's also called a transparency. So positive, slide, transparency, they're synonyms. There is no black and white slide film. They don't make it. Now, talk about the rebirth of traditional film capture. Europeans are once again way ahead of us. Because at one time, Kodak, who's been slowly digging the hole, preparing to get in it and then cover themselves up, at one time Kodak made what is called a direct positive kit. Direct positive kit, which the Europeans are trying to resurrect. And I heard through Laura Meek, who's over in Europe shooting like a crazy person and making money doing it, she told me that she ran across one of these types of film processes, and I can't remember whether it was German or Spanish or, but they're all over there recreating what Kodak threw out the window. And so this direct positive kit, you shoot regular, negative, black and white, negative film, and we know what that is, right? And you run it through the special kit that transforms the negative to a positive. And about 10 years ago maybe not quite that long ago, maybe 9, I had 2 students that went crazy with photography and loved it. And they did a slideshow with black and white film. And it was really fabulous. Anyway, so you can see these things, and quite frankly, I don't know it all. I'm the first to admit I don't know it all. Nobody does. Those people are rare. They're called geniuses. And anyway, so if you get really bitten with the photo bug, research, Google, you'll find it. I don't know what the names are. Yes.
Did you say the direct positive kit transforms a negative into a positive?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got that written down right.
So it takes it from like a projection printed negative at the enlarger to a transparency that you put in those projectors that are under a plastic bag in the back. They look like this. They're positives. So the transparency, the slide, the positive, records the world as you see it. The negative, black and white negative, records it in an opposite fashion. So if you took a picture of me, this would be clear, and the board behind me would be solid black. So that when you make your print at the enlarger, where there's nothing, no emulsion buildup on the film from a black sweater, the light passes through that transparency part and prints a black image on the paper. It reverses it. Tyler, are you with me? It's not too complicated, is it? Mm-mm. As opposed to the digital recording, it looks just like the world. So, to get the maximum use out of exposure, with negative film, traditional black and white negative film, you want to slightly overexpose it. So you get emulsion buildup, meaning you want to add a little bit more light, like maybe a stop or a half a stop. You guys can do a half stop with the half stops, and Tyler, you do a full stop. Now, if you want to swap out cameras, we can do that. I'm sure I can find another more contemporary AE1, but that camera that you have, Tyler, has an excellent lens on it, because it's heavier than these other cameras. So, with negative film, you want to add a little more light. Not a lot, just a little bit, pinch more.
So the film that we bought.
Yes.
Okay.
Black and white film. And when you're making an exposure, whether it be digital or color slide or color film, no, colored slide, excuse me. Color slide, color transparency, color positive. You want to slightly underexpose it. Same way with digital. Digital and all of our names given to positive film. You increase the amount of information by underexposure rather than overexposure. Now, you guys have been around long enough to experience 1 hour quick print labs, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Don't value your determination of image quality in final print by those labs. They are an exercise in mediocrity. They really are. You never get good density in that font. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you luck out. But, you know, those color labs, this is how the film goes through. Boom, boom, boom. You have nobody actually looking at it and going, look, that doesn't look right, let me back it up. So, when you get in that document and we start making prints, don't give me anything washed out. I want good density like those over there. Okay? So back to this exposure thing now. There is a one-to-one relationship that exists between the shutter and the aperture. Was that me or you? Need to do any. Okay, aperture. Have y'all memorized these numbers? Kinda, sorta, maybe? Well, we're gonna learn this next, okay? And be aware, there's gonna be a quiz, a pop quiz. It's coming, because I want you to learn these numbers. Now that we have documented this, there are no half stops in the shutters. No half stops. You only have full numbers. And I'm asking you to learn these full stop numbers, whether you're talking aperture or shutter. Because if you have a digital camera that's semi-professional grade, semi-pro grade, you look through the screen and you see lots of numbers, don't you? Or if you have an automatic film load camera, semi-automatic, automatic, fully manned, professional grade film camera, and it has not, it's all internal adjustments, exposure adjustments, you'll see three numbers. You'll see F11 and two numbers in between, and then you see F8. So with the more automated film cameras, with LED internal readings, each one of the standard shutter speeds and apertures have two numbers in between them. So you can adjust to thirds of a stop. But if you learn the standard numbers as we are in this class with an older traditional style camera, you will understand that array of numbers. You'll know where you are in exposure by those standardized numbers. It'll eliminate a lot of confusion. And your moms and your dads, when you go home, they go, "You're taking photography, what are all these numbers?" Then you get them to memorize these, and it'll make sense. The numbers in between. They are making adjustments, whether to the over or the under exposure direction, but not a full stop, a third of a stop. Have I lost anybody yet? We're all on board. Okay, excellent. Now, there is a law that you have to memorize. And it speaks of this relationship between the aperture and the shutter. Don't write these numbers for the shutter down yet because we're going to expand it. All right. Trying to keep it simple on the front end of this. This is called the law of reciprocity. The law of reciprocity. Okay. Law of reciprocity. Law of reciprocity. While you're writing that down, I have to go get a drink of water. I'll be back. Other than that, a wardrobe change. Good. Okay, I didn't reciprocity speaks of, this is the way you're gonna memorize it. The law of reciprocity speaks of the 1-to-1 ratio relationship, the 1-to-1 relationship. It's called a ratio. Speaks of the 1-to-1 relationship that exists between the aperture and the shutter. And period. For mid-range films, it speaks of the failure of this relationship at shutter speeds of 1/500th of a second and faster, along with 1 second and slower. Along with exposures of 1 second and slower.
Failure at what?
Excuse me?
It speaks of failure at what?
It speaks of the failure of this 1-to-1 relationship at shutter speeds of 1/500th of a second and faster, along with shutter speeds of 1 second and slower. So this is slow up here, and this is fast down there. Make sure we haven't timed out here. Yeah, we're still running. Cool. So we understand that these numbers of 1 second, and we're gonna go, what happened to the purple? I do this all the time. Then we have 2 seconds. Then we have 4 seconds. We need that little mark, apostrophe, and then 8 seconds. Okay. Detail ready? You wanna finish? So. One second. 8 seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi. Now, you people that don't have 8 seconds, should I do it again?
Okay.
Yes. So the other numbers that fall in between that 1 second, this is a 2 second, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. 4 seconds, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, and then the 8. And so there is a rhythm to life. There's a rhythm to photography. And y'all are gonna do it with me, okay? It's like a metronome. And when you get in the darkroom and you start processing, same sort of rhythm, okay? So, we're gonna do a 4-second exposure, because all of you don't have it. But look at your shutter speed dial, you got a B, don't you? That B stands for bulb, B-U-L-B. Did you find it? See there? Bulb. So, you put the shutter speed dial on bulb, and it stays open as long as you press the shutter release button. Okay, more camera parts now. This is the film advance lever. This is the shutter release button. Okay? So, you could put it on B, put your camera on a tripod, press that shutter release button, and count for 4 seconds. If you need a 4-second exposure, here we go. Ready? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. And I have had, in architectural photography, to count a 15-second exposure. This is before cell phones had, counting mechanisms and I'm out there. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. So all photographers carry a second-hand watch, so you can keep track. So each one of you can put your shutter speed dial on B, and you're all gonna do it with me, or sing along, okay? 4 seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. Again. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. You can do it. The rhythm of life. So that's what B's about. And B falls way up there. That's why I have a little apple box here. B, okay? So, yes.
Sorry, just to make sure that I understand, the B, do you hold down the button just for the seconds that you count and then release it?
But, one thing that we have to be aware of, I just want you to be able to see the board. One thing that we have to be aware of when we do this kind of long exposure, this is called a shutter release cable. It screws into the shutter release button. See that little port? And they have these guys at DeVille. Now, when you're doing like a 4-second exposure, you use this to hold the shutter open. Shutter release cable. Sometimes called, in new digital world, remote release. Because with new modern electronic cameras, it's infrared release. But you use one of these cable releases so that you don't cause motion. Your camera's going to be on a tripod, you advance the film, and you use the cable release. If you don't, you could cause some vibration, and in the digital world, pixelation, and we just see it as a blur on film. Shutter release cable. This is gonna be something you're gonna have to identify. And I don't know if they can see it.
Shutter release cable.
Okay? Now, down here, they go further. You can have 1/500th of a second, or excuse me, 1/2000th of a second. One 2,000, 1/4,000. And you even see 1/8,000th of a second. It's as hot in here as it is. It's hot in here. So, that's the numbers that you're gonna memorize, all the way up to 1/8,000th of a second. Now with the shutter speeds, you can't see.
Oh, it's the.
You want me to make sure that it's still visible from here?
Yes, make sure it's still running, because it does time out. One 8,000.
You can't see the 2,000 and all because
of this?
Yeah.
Hang on.
That's a little better. You want me to turn it a little bit?
Yeah, just don't let it flop, that's, because I've got the, keypad up underneath, it's doing the reverse of what it wants to do at this point.
There it goes. You can
Okay,
see it.
thanks. So, this law of reciprocity applies to these numbers, both aperture and shutter. Okay, and what we're attempting to do, we're attempting to get the perfect exposure. Which equals correct amount of light, which equals time plus volume. That's the exposure equation. Perfect exposure equals correct amount of light, which equals time, shutter, plus volume, aperture. Trying to find the black marker.
It's on top.
There it is. So, aperture equals V. Shutter T. Time. Time. Volume. Pretty simple, isn't it? Not near as complicated as some of these wannabe professional photographers like to make it sound. What's complicated about photography is this one law. One commercial law for commercial photographers should be: you never light an environment. You raise the volume of light to authenticate or match as close as you can to the way it appears to the human eye, especially in architectural photography.
Can you repeat that?
Oh, boy. This is the first time I've ever talked about this, in beginning class, because y'all are getting it. Most wannabe commercial photographers out there, use a flash. And bam, we already talked about this. Bam, it lights the foreground, and then as you go back behind the foreground, it gets dark. And that's what happens to the digital files when you don't use flash, right? We already talked about bouncing light, didn't we? And what it does is it throws the light up to the ceiling, which bounces down to illuminate the back. And you also make a shutter adjustment. You slow the shutter down. You have to balance the speed of the shutter opening and closing as if you didn't have the flash at all, so that you get background illumination. You with me, Amelia?
I think so.
That's why you have to have a sophisticated flash. That's why the flash on camera little pop-up is worthless. Worthless. We are almost going full circle now from our very beginning class. And I know when I first talked about the flash, you're going, what? So the shutter does not respond to the flash as far as the amount of light put out. It's the duration of light. So you can use a combination of slow shutter speeds to balance with the ambient light in the room, and then use a bounce to illuminate and add color. Because we see color, we see information, because of gazillions of light rays banging around out there. If the subject is not illuminated with light, and this whole idea of taking your art to the shadows and, now with the iPad, which you all are watching, thank you, the iPad camera, and that's a Generation 6 iPad, which has the same camera that the iPhone 11 does, or this XS Max. This is the same camera as the iPhone 11. It's just bigger. It's just bigger. Now with these cameras that come in our new electronic devices, it has made image capture much better. Because you know how many DPI these images are? In this one and in that one? 288. And you need a 300 DPI image to go to press, to print well. It can't go big, but generally speaking, 300 DPI is what you need. Now, if you go billboard size, it's gonna have to be better, But you can make up that, 12 DPI with just a little sharpening in Photoshop. Or you can even adjust on the phone cameras. You can adjust brightness and everything. It's pretty crazy. But without additional lighting via flash, a sophisticated flash, you're still not going to really get the best quality. So you get one of those digital cameras that is I think they're 32 megs now. Somebody's made a 32, 33 meg camera. You'll hear all about this on Tuesday. It's getting better. Everything. I got a little thought for you. What's the word I'm trying to use? Don't look progress. Don't turn your back on progress. Don't turn your back on progress. If you do, it'll never look back on you. And I brought this up in senior seminar last night. Change is good. You have to stay abreast of what's going on around you and in your world. As the Bible says, you have to be in this world and not of this world. Because I promise you, if you do not connect with the world around you, if you do not critically think and deductively reason about what you see out there, you are going to make some very bad decisions. Because every change is one of the life constants. There are 4 life constants. Death. Let's put God first. God, death, taxes, and change. That's it. Those never go away. Never. And as young adults, getting ready to find your career or start stepping into a career path, you better be aware of what goes on around you. Because as Malcolm White said last night, the world out there is way different than it is here. It is extremely different. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. But the only way that you can learn to safely, soulfully process what you see is to know a little bit about it. That's critical thinking and deductive reasoning. If you don't critically review the world as you pass through it and deductively reason about it, think about it, process it, you are not going to, you're going to inhibit growth. And another thought about growth. In order to grow, you have to be willing to temporarily let go of security. Temporarily release security. You have to venture out. And, going to school, you leave one little toadstool called the home, like little drones, little minions that live under a toadstool. You leave that one because they've sheltered and protected you. And you come to Belhaven, and we want to shelter and protect, but we also want you to get out and become connected with a career world. That's the only way you're going to find a job. The only way. Now we've had a little philosophy, a little science, and a little camera speak. So, what is the perfect exposure? That's the question. How do you know what the perfect exposure is? There's another law that you're gonna learn. Okay, does everybody have this, all these numbers? Memorize them. Write them down. You know, when you're in second grade, third grade, and you do something bad like chew gum in the classroom, you get put in the corner, and you gotta write 50 times, I will not chew gum, I will not chew gum. Do the same thing with this, and then lay it on your forehead, and go to sleep, and osmosis, what's osmosis, Tyler? Turn it up. Huh? Movement from one density to another. We're moving from one density to another, and you're gonna get that information embedded in you. Now, even though you have memorized this, do not think that you can get out in the field and start calculating in your head. What's the other thing that you should have in your camera bag by now? A little spiral notebook, right? Like Grandpa puts in his pocket so he can help remember things. You're gonna do the same thing. The first roll of film you shoot, you're gonna have basically 5 shots on it, and that's it. But you're gonna bracket. You're gonna take several shots of the same thing. So you need the tripod, right? How many people have a tripod? You bought one while you were there?
My dad brought them in.
Oh, excellent. Tripod? Tripod?
No, my parents decided not to send.
Tripod?
I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Tripod! You've gotta have it before we shoot film. And we are gonna be shooting film. Where's the syllabus? Oh, let me see. Okay, we got film exposure, that's what we're talking about today. We're actually ahead of it. Yeah, we're kind of this, parts and this at the same time. Hey, Rob. Today's what, Thursday? We will probably load film on Tuesday. So I want you to, take the cameras and put them, strap around your neck. And I want you to take the lens cap off. And I want you to set the shutter speed at 1/4 of a second. And you're gonna set the aperture at f11. And for ASA 400, now we're venturing out into another realm of discussion here. You don't need to worry about setting the ASA dial yet. I'm gonna make sure it's on 400. But for ASA 400, that's the light sensitivity of the film. Different ASAs, whether you're talking digital or film, represent light sensitivity of the sensors or the film emulsion. The higher the number, the higher the ASA, the faster the image capture. The slower the ASA, the longer the image capture. But we are working in your definition for law of reciprocity. One of the phrases was for mid-range film, right? Mid-range? That's what we're shooting. we're shooting a mid-range film. So, for mid-range ASA 400 speed film, F11 at 1/4 of a second would give you a good exposure in here. Shooting ambient light. And we know that 1/4 of a second is dangerously slow, don't we? So you need a tripod. Now let me see how we did it. Put it down in the proper direction. Yes, there's the light. This shouldn't be on. There, okay? And let me see our aperture. Okay, good. Make sure it rests on the board, not in between. Okay, let's see, Tyler, how you're doing? What?
Hopefully, it should, how far do I pull these things?
Okay, we'll do that in a second, okay? Four. F11. Make sure it's on F11. Okay, how far do you advance the shutter? The shutter advance lever, that's called the shutter advance lever. That far. Don't force it. If for whatever reason it doesn't want to go, then you're at the end of the roll of film, okay? Got it? Advance your film. Don't force it, right? If it doesn't go that far, advance. Nope, no further. It should go that far. And if it doesn't, you're at the end of the roll. Don't force it. Did I do you? Let me get the camera on. I think it is. Advance your film. Don't force it. It stops there. So that turns the camera off. That turns the camera on. That position is on. Now, release your shutter. There you go. Got it?
I think so.
Now, you turn the camera off so that the battery doesn't wear. Okay? Y'all wanna keep that shutter release button, shutter release lever pushed into the camera when you're not using it. When you're out in the field, it's fine. Now, what was I gonna do? I want you to advance your film. Hit release. Okay, now advance your film. There you go. Raise the camera to your eye.
No, it's not moving out.
Do I?
It's not moving out.
You're gonna have to release the film, or shutter release button. Ah, shoot, that's terrible now. I think you got it locked, turned off. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now release your shutter. No, release, shutter release button. There you go. Now advance your film. Okay, raise the camera to your eye. Focus on me. And I want you to realize that, let's step forward a little bit. So I'm sharp, right? But look back there, it's not that sharp. No. Look behind me, it's not that sharp. Got your finger on top of the lens, Susanna. Okay. Remember, cradle the lens. So, when you release that shutter, go ahead and release it. The shutter speed is real slow, right? So you're gonna have blur. But that lens is going to stop down. I have it erased. That lens is going to stop down to a tiny opening and organize the light. So the softness that you see behind me is going to disappear. It's going to be sharp. Okay. So we know how to operate the camera now. How many people have been looking through the camera? Yeah, having fun, right? Now you're going to take the camera and you're going to take pretend pictures. You are going to frame things up. Those people who have the A, you can turn the camera off by putting it on L. Put it on L, lock. L stands for lock. Do you have one of those?
Yes, ma'am. A.
Okay. A is operational, L is lock, okay? So when you lock the camera, you're turning the camera off. Where do I want to go next? I don't think I can do a demo without getting right on top of y'all, and I've already been on top of y'all twice. But I can explain what happens. Inside, the lens is coupled with the shutter by the way the lens mounts to the camera. And so when the shutter release button starts the mechanism to work, it tells the shutter to open up and the aperture shuts down, stops down. And so I want you to turn your camera back on, put it on A, advance the film, raise it to your eye, again, put the plane of focus. When you're focusing on me, you're determining what's going to be sharp, and that area that is sharp is called the plane of focus, okay? That's not in focus. This is out of focus. This is focus plane. So I want you to once again take a picture. Go. Thank you. Take a picture of me. And for a split second, you lose sight of me, don't you? Which is why you keep both eyes opened, so you can catch peripheral activity, and you can kind of look around that pentaprism. Where's the pentaprism? Pentaprism, where is it? That's right, Lauren, where is it?
My mind just went blank.
Okay, right there. And all of you have something on top of that pentaprism, don't you? That's called the hot shoe. The hot shoe is where you mount your flash. So, back to the mechanics of what happens when you take that picture. You release the shutter with your finger, the mirror locks up, and the shutter communicates with the lens to stop down all together at one time. can you see it? Can you see how it works? I can do this. You're gonna be so careful when you load film into the camera. If you get one of those long strands of hair in that camera, we're gonna have a problem, okay?
I'll let you know.
You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't allow that to happen, would you? Can you see the mirror? See it flip up? See the mirror? See the mirror? Pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's, this one little shutter release button controls all of that activity. And I can show you why motion happens on film if you don't have a tripod. Ready? That's a 2-second exposure. So everything would be blurred. One Mississippi, two Mississippi. So now, we talked about that. Now we're gonna have to discuss perfect exposure for outside. On a sunny day like today. This is the Sun 16 law. Okay, everybody's got the law of reciprocity? I need one of those long scientific boards. All right. This is the reason why you need a handheld light meter. Especially if you're going to take photographs. I can't remember. Graphic design? Oh boy. Yeah. You need to go get one of those Goslings. Graphic design? I don't know what you're gonna do with it, Tyler. If you're just gonna have fun, I don't need it. But I could see in your career where you might need to document plant life or something like that. And, you know, not everything, it's much brighter out there, isn't it, than it is in here. And so we're shooting a mid-range film. And all of these laws that I'm giving to you reference mid-range film. Okay, it's time to erase. Everybody has this? Now, if you guys have any questions, girls, if you guys have any questions, please ask, okay? Because it mid-range films, and we're talking light sensitivity, you know. Some films are very slow, some films are mid-range, some films are very fast. In the digital world, you have slow settings, you have mid-range settings, and you have fast settings. And one thing that we just discussed, that you get better resolution, better information with slow speed films. Because it has a gradual buildup, it doesn't shock. Digital, 100% applicable. If you want the best range of color, if you want the best range of value in each color, with digital photography, you set your ASA dial, which is your light sensitivity dial, at ASA 100. That gives you the best results. And of course, the camera manufacturers will say, oh, you can stop a speeding car. Yeah, you can. But the quality of the final information is not going to be the best. It's going to be contrasty. So, the ASA of image capture is directly applicable to resolution. Not only in sharpness, but in information, descriptive information about an object or a situation. Because both of those, sharpness and information, is attached to contrast. So the slower the ASA, the lower the contrast, the higher the ASA, the greater the contrast and the loss of information. Does that make sense? That's not that confusing. That's not good. Anybody friends with a banker? Like a banking person? I need a banker for senior seminar. I just went and met with this guy for like a half an hour and the bank will give him permission to do it. Okay, in film. There's probably an 800 out there somewhere. And I know that there's 1,600. I think there's 12 and no. It's 16 and it's 32. These are all ASAs. Currently existing. In the past, there were a better range. It went all the way down to 25 and it went all the way up to 6,400. 6,400. But currently speaking, digitally, I think this is the range. And film-wise, this is also going to be pretty much the range. And the reason for that is this, that as progress has moved forward in film product and photo supplies, improvements are made, and that wide range of ASA is no longer needed. So, this is what I'd like for you to memorize. And you can clearly see times 2, times 2, times 2, can't you? I mean, 50 times 2 is 100. 100 times 2 is 400. 200, excuse me, math. But that's one stop. Each one of these. Colors. And we'll go with that. So this represents one stop. Right? Boom. This is 2 stops. So now that we've discussed shutter, and the purpose of the shutter is to stop action, right? As you increase to 2 stops, you facilitate the stopping of action even more, don't you? Because the shutter speed is time, right? So, let's see, I'm going to use this color now. Yes, professional cameras, or photographers, shoot film. Oh yeah, Joel Meyerowitz. When 911 and the world towers came down, his studio was overlooking the whole thing. And he caught, I think he did it like on an hourly basis originally, then he moved to a daily basis, or maybe 2 times a day, a weekly basis, so he had this kind of time release of everything. And he has produced beautiful monographs. Monograph is a coffee table book. It's a photographer's portfolio, printed for coffee table viewing. And he has published many books. And if we have time, we're going to look at some of his slides from St. Louis. He was hired by St. Louis to do a documentary portrait of the city following the World Trade, the World's Fair and the arch that was built. So, the mid-range films are for like the average sort of person. And they still do shoot professionals. Do you have a question?
Can I go to the restroom, please?
Oh, sure. Y'all want to stand up for a second? Take a break. I need water. This is tragic. I don't know what I'm going to do for senior seminar. do banks have to be so kooky? They can be the most. I had to photograph bankers, and when I had to do portraits of bankers, I went, boy, they have no expression. They don't know how to consume life.
What type of banker, like, sorry.
It's the COVID-19 crap, I'm sure.
What type of bankers are you looking, like, job-wise, are you looking at?
I'm looking for like a bank manager who can talk about getting credit, who can talk about applying for a loan, the banking business of being an artist. I wonder if you could Zoom it. We could do it up there.
That's good.
But they have no personality. You know, doctors are a little more flamboyant, but they still have that nip and tuck sort of, you know, appearance about them. You go to art openings down at the museum and you can go, banker, doctor, attorney, banker, you know, just by the way they look.
Yeah.
Hair-wise, everything.
My uncle works with, Farmer Mac.
Where's the,
My uncle, he works with Farmer Mac. It's like a banking company, but what he does is he like takes out potential clients and everything and like talks to them, like, cause he works with like,
oh, he knows the business.
he does, he talks about the business with them and,
Would he be willing to come and talk for about an hour and a half about,
that's the problem. I thought of him, but then he's having some serious health issues right now, so.
he's being cautious?
Yeah, he's just, I was about to bring him on, but then I didn't, and then I did, I forgot what he was he's just going through a lot of some serious health issues right now, so.
And he needs to be careful.
But it's funny, cause he very much has quite a personality and just,
Oh, because he has to entertain. I mean, he's the grease that keeps the wheel moving, and so he's more
cause he has to
social.
talk to the clients and take them out and everything, and,
Right.
'cause, yeah, they work for farmers, so they can keep loans going to the farmers and everything, so.
Why don't we all sanitize? That's a good idea. We got some back there. Everybody pass that bottle around. Everybody have your own? That's cool. Let's take a moment and. Got it, sweetie?
Oh, yeah, wait,
Cause that stuff, look at my nose, look at how that's my nose over there.
this is
You sweetie.
cocoa and cream.
Oh, good, thank you. I got this stuff called, natural bee, like bee, like the insect. And, they have it up at Montgomery Hardware. I mean, my hands were like blistered when we first started having to sanitize. There were still cracks, I mean, I still can peel skin off.
It dries your skin off.
And washing your hands a lot.
So, yeah, thank you for this, Wendy. Okay, so where were we here? Just kind of throw it out to him, if Shane won't Zoom, maybe he could video chat with us, or?
Yeah, I'll talk to him about it. I probably shouldn't have brought it up, just, he has cancer,
Oh, go
so,
on. Okay,
I just thought I'd
he's got too
interject,
many
but
things on his plate right
yeah.
now.
that's just the sort of thing that's just going on, but I just thought I'd bring it up, just his job, what he does and everything,
If
so.
y'all think of somebody, please share it.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have, I'd led you on also, but I just thought it was
I mean,
interesting.
I could go to our faculty here, but they're all a little too banking style. They're not energetic, you know.
It's just if he wasn't, he'd be a good
Okay, so, we're back to this. And remember the law of reciprocity, it said for mid-range, but you buy those professional films that are very slow, architects use it, I used it, you know, ASA 50. Fast films, like, sports films, and, they have a reciprocity failure that's even more narrow. You know, it was 1/500th of a second all the way down to 1 second, and all of that was operational. But with the, professional films, yeah, I'm trying to remember, I shot a lot of Velvia, which is ASA 50 for architectural work, and reciprocity failure range was like from 1/8 of a second, you were good from 1/8 of a second all the way down to, I think it was like 30 seconds. But if you went beyond 30 seconds, then you had to worry about the failure, the loss of light. So it favors long exposures. And then sports people, theirs probably goes from like operational range would be 1/500th to maybe 1/8000th of a second. So you can see that those films favor, the slow ASAs favor long, slow exposures, and the ASAs that are high favor rapid exposures. Okay. Now, I need to make sure, well, you're not gonna use that, because you're gonna be using the Sun 16 law. Now, here's another law. This gives you proper exposure. Proper exposure means proper density of negative. This is coming to terms with photography, which I passed out last class about film. So proper exposure means proper density. Thickness of emulsion. If emulsion is not properly exposed and it doesn't receive enough light, it's said to be underexposed and the emulsion is thin. There's a thin recording. This is for negative film. If the emulsion receives too much light, then it is said to be thick and overexposed. The emulsion builds up too much density, like this. Okay. That one is thick, that's thin. That's thick, that's thin. That's thick, that's thin. That's thick, and that's thin. And the same thing applies to color negative film. It looks the same. It's reversed, you know, as opposed to positive, transparency, or slide. So, the Sun 16 law applies to this mid-range film again. And here we go with the law. On a bright, sunny day, between the hours of 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. What kind of angle is that? Look at the arrangement. 10 o'clock, it's at 45 45-degree angle, isn't it? 45-degree angle is a magical angle in photography. So back to the definition. On a bright sunny day, between the hours of 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, with the sun to your back, okay, look at me before you write, at an angle no lower than 45. If it gets down here, this doesn't apply. So at an angle no lower than 45 degrees, with the sun to your back at an angle no lower than 45 degrees. You set the aperture on f16. And the shutter speed on a number that matches that is the closest match at a number. You set the shutter speed on a number that is the closest match to the ASA of the film loaded in the camera. Correct? So what would be the shutter speed if we're shooting ASA 400? Look at your shutter speeds. Remember, we're shooting negative film. Remember, with negative film, we do what? Okay, I'll give you a hint. For ASA 400, it'd be 1/250th of a second, because we want this slightly overexposed. But if we were shooting ASA 200 and not 400, what would it be? Yes, because you want to slightly overexpose. Now, we just put slide film in the camera, positive film, and we want to slightly underexpose. What would it be for ASA 400? 1/500. What would it be for ASA 200? 1/250th. 1/250th of a second. But we're shooting negative film, and we're shooting ASA 400. So when you give the definition, you do not give me a shutter speed. You just simply say you select the number closest to the ASA of the film loaded in the camera, period. And then you say, with slide film, we slightly underexpose. And with negative film, we slightly overexpose. Hannah, I put the gloves back in there.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
You don't give me a number on the shutter. You simply tell me where to look. And that's the definition. And so, now, we don't have film in the camera yet, but we're gonna learn to start reading light. And I want you to be aware that everything is connected. And what are we noticing about the daytime light? It's not lasting as long, is it? And if you start noticing where the sun comes up in midsummer, you don't know because you're here and you're not here all the time. But at my house, I'm looking at through the front of I'm facing the front of my house, you know, I'm looking outside from the inside. And in the summer months, the sun is right about here. And it's coming up now over here. So, in the summer months, the sun is more direct overhead. And in the winter months, it's gonna be down here. So, not only are we losing light, but we're gaining contrast. Because it's at an angle. And your operational Sun 16 law hours going to be reduced, and you might want to actually open it up a step. Because the light is different. It's not as overall and warm. Now, those graphic designers, you guys got to get the handheld light meter, because you're going to be taking 241, and you prove to me you understand depth of field, and you do window light portraits in the spring. And you need that handheld light meter, you might as well get used to using it. Susanna, what's your major again?
Art therapy, so like psychology and like
Art therapy? I don't know, you just might fall in love with photography. Then you buy a handheld light meter. But again, with digital. Now that we understand aperture and shutter, and we understand that they're, do you want to check and see if that thing's still running? I made sure that the battery was like almost 80%. It is good. Okay, excellent. Hello, guys. You're gonna be responsible for all this. With digital, now that we understand aperture and shutter and the range of stops, with digital, with no additional lighting assist, like flash, a good one and not an on-camera one, you have at the max 2 stops. Now, if you buy a real contemporary camera and you drop $1,500 on it, you might get 2.5 stops. Because the pixels are going to be better, more numerous. And if you buy a full frame camera versus an APS-C camera viewing system, APS-C has a smaller field, less information, full frame, more information. You guys are going to be able to understand what Randy's talking about on Tuesday. But with digital, you only get 2.5 stops. So each half stop is like a stop jump, you know, so the contrast level, you lose grays, you lose mid-range gray. And so the contrast level of digital photography is elevated. You have 2.5 stops at the max between the highlights and the shadows for color information and shadow for value information. Because color is hue, and each hue has a value scale. Correct? You getting that, Tyler? You should understand, because you've had art classes. But with film, you get almost five stops of information. And the number of stops of information can be enhanced with a slower developer. We're gonna match a mid-range film with a mid-range developer. And when I'm talking about mid-range versus fast, I'm talking about how quickly you process the film. If you slow that process time in the developer down, you get a fuller range of value. And consequently, the negative loses contrast and gets a little muddier looking. It's a flatter negative. Because you want a little contrast in the negative, but not a lot. Does that make sense? The speed of the process time of the film in the tank, the longer the process time, the flatter the negative. The faster the process time, the more contrasty the negative. So we are going to match a mid-range process time, average process time, with a mid-range average film type. So 5 stops of value is significant. Really significant. And that's what we go for to get that beautiful print of the interior that I keep showing. I'm gonna actually have it on an easel for next week's lectures, discussions. Are you guys worn out? Do you feel comfortable with everything we talked about today? So, I guess what I'm going to do is turn the, goodbye. Turn this little baby on.